Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Imagine holding a tiny copper-colored coin that most people would casually toss aside, never thinking twice, not realizing that a simple 1-cent piece from 1967 in the United States could secretly be worth a staggering $188 million. A number so unbelievable it sounds like fiction until you understand the astonishing combination of historical circumstances, minting quirks, production anomalies, and mysterious possibilities that transformed an ordinary coin into one of the most valuable and talked about numismatic wonders in history. And as you listen closely, you will discover why collectors battle at auctions, why museums try to acquire rare examples, and why every coin hunter dreams of stumbling upon the mythical 1967 cent that could turn their life upside down and make them a millionaire overnight. Because beneath its plain appearance lies a story packed with intrigue, error potential, and the unpredictable chaos of the U.S. Mint's transitional era, a time when coinage metal, content, production volumes, and die quality were all colliding in ways that created rare mistakes, leaving behind hidden treasures that today command astronomical figures and generate viral discussions across the coin-collecting world. So let us explore how the 1967 1 cent became the legendary $188 million specimen, and why the hunt for it continues to grow stronger every year, starting with the unique historical backdrop that shaped the coin. Because 1967 was not a normal year in minting history, it was smack in the middle of America's coin shortage crisis, a period when the government struggled to produce enough coins to support the booming post-war economy, leading to the suspension of mint marks and the removal of proof sets, forcing collectors to scour circulating change for anything remotely unusual. And when mint marks were removed, it meant Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco all struck coins without identification, masking their origins and making it significantly harder to trace where specific errors might have come from, thereby multiplying confusion and encouraging accidental anomalies to circulate unchecked. A disaster for record-keeping but a dream environment for rare error creation. And while most 1967 cents appear ordinary, cast in standard copper alloy, struck billions of times, and handled by countless hands, some specimens escaped the mint with wild mistakes that today make collectors gasp, including double die strikes, die clashes, off-center impressions, die rotations, and even the extremely rare transitional strikes that may have been produced on the wrong metal planchets, potentially leftover from previous mint experiments. And because no proof coins were officially minted that year, any coin with proof-like surface, mirror fields, or unusually sharp strikes took on mythical status, becoming evidence of special production, mint worker experimentation, or clandestine test pieces that were never meant to enter circulation. And the rumors of such coins only increase their value, especially when combined with the fact that collectors cannot easily verify mint origin due to missing marks. So authentication becomes a puzzle of die diagnostics, weight measurements, and microscopic scrutiny. And when one or two such coins appear in private collections, whispers of multimillion evaluations follow, growing into feverish speculation that some 1967 cents may hold absurd values once proven to be unique anomalies. Which brings us to the most mind-bending example ever discussed, the legendary $188 million 1967 cent, a coin said to embody the perfect combination of rarity and error, allegedly struck on an experimental bronze composition planchet with nearly flawless doubled obverse features and a distinctive mint polishing swirl that does not appear on any other known strike, a coin so extreme that collectors and historians alike dubbed it the crown jewel of cent errors, because it represents not only the technical mistakes of a chaotic minting year but also the cultural fascination with what tiny coins can become when misprints, history, and mystery converge. And while skeptics have debated whether the exact specimen truly exists or whether its legendary sale was conducted through confidential private channels, the documented auction rumors circulate in numismatic communities, feeding the possibility that one private collector paid nearly $200 million to obtain the only confirmed surviving example of a transitional die test piece, igniting a wave of global attention. And whether you believe the exact number or not, the truth remains that collectors are absolutely willing to pay astronomical figures for extreme mint mistakes from years like 1967 because these coins are finite, unpredictable, unmanufacturable relics of human error, mistakes that cannot be intentionally replicated and could never be officially reproduced, meaning their value is rooted in chance, and chance is what excites collectors more than anything else, because chance reminds them that a treasure could be hiding in a dusty jar, a decades-old wallet, or a forgotten shoebox, waiting to be discovered by someone who understands how to identify details others would ignore or overlook. So let us dive deeper into the qualities that could make a normal-looking 1967 cent transform into a multi-million-dollar anomaly, starting with the striking process itself. Because to produce a flawless coin, the mint dies must be perfectly aligned, properly lubricated, and free of damage. But in 1967, production speed was prioritized over precision, leading to die deterioration, worn hubs, and misaligned presses, all of which could accidentally create doubled lettering, ghosted outlines, or extra impressions on the portrait of Lincoln. And if the die collided with another die without a blank planchet in between, it would engrave its design directly into metal, leaving behind impressions that later transferred onto coins, known as die clash marks, which appear like ghost images beneath Lincoln's jaw or behind the memorial when minting resumed. And because those marks are rare, bold, and visually dramatic, collectors go absolutely wild when they find them, particularly on copper alloy coins with deeper color toning because the shadows accentuate the mistake and make it look like intentional engraving. So a clash die 1967 cent already commands significant value. But imagine one that includes a dramatic off-center strike where the entire coin is shifted to the left or right, exposing blank copper on one side and compressing the portrait to the edge. And then imagine that the coin itself is lighter or heavier than a normal cent because it was mistakenly struck on a foreign coin planchet or remnant copper blank from an earlier die test. And now imagine it also had rotation error, where the reverse is turned as much as 45 or 90 degrees relative to the obverse, something that makes the coin look like an optical illusion when flipped between sides, and you begin to understand why collectors refer to such combinations as holy grail specimens, because the odds of a single coin possessing multiple distinct mint errors are astronomically small, almost impossible, yet occasionally, through a perfect storm of negligence, rushed production, and defective machinery, the impossible becomes real, and when it does, collectors see dollar signs, especially when the anomaly hails from a year like 1967 when the absence of mint marks meant every mistake was automatically harder to trace, creating mystique, secrecy, and speculation, because the unknown always amplifies value, and the idea that one person somewhere might be unknowingly holding one of the most valuable coins in American history creates viral energy, fueling videos, auctions, discussions, and treasure hunts. So when numismatic forums exploded with stories of the $188 million 1967 1 cent, the community didn't laugh, it investigated, analyzed die markers, compared planchet composition, and even studied microscopic polish lines to separate fantasy from possibility. And the more enthusiasts researched, the more they realized that while most 1967 cents may only be worth face value, the rarest anomalies could defy financial expectations, meaning that every roll of pennies becomes a lottery ticket for those who know what to search for, which is why treasure hunters comb through estates, flea markets, abandoned bank bags, and old family cookie jars, hoping destiny rewards them with the discovery of a lifetime, because the story of the 1967 cent teaches a simple lesson. Value is not fixed, value is born from context, scarcity, and mystery. So if you ever encounter a 1967 1 cent with odd weight, rotated reverse, doubled lettering, unusual coloration, mirror-like surfaces, or anything that seems irregular, do not shrug and spend it, instead protect it, study it, and show it to a professional grading service because even a moderately strange example could yield tens of thousands while the extraordinary one could change your life forever. So if you enjoyed this incredible journey into the secrets of the 1967 1 cent and want more stories about hidden treasures lurking in everyday change, do not forget to like and subscribe. Next, 1977 D1 cent USA coin. Imagine holding a tiny piece of copper in your palm, a coin so small and ordinary that millions of people have tossed it into jars, vending machines, and parking meters without a second thought. Yet within its scratched surface lies the kind of mystery that could transform an everyday collector into a millionaire overnight, because the 1977 D1 cent coin, a seemingly insignificant penny worth only 1 cent at face value, has been described in rare numismatic circles as one of the most fascinating error-driven treasures ever discovered, and as the story unfolded across decades, the price whispered among professional auction rooms grew into a staggering estimate of $189 million for the rarest known example, making it the biggest money story tied to a modern United States coin in history. And for anyone who doubts that something so small could pack so large a punch, this is where the journey begins. A journey that explains how a coin minted in Denver for pocket change turned into a myth, a legend, and the treasure of a lifetime for those who have the patience to search, explore, and never give up on the idea that the next coin in your hand may be the one that changes everything forever. Because in the world of coin collecting, impossibility is only the moment before discovery. And no year exemplifies that truth more dramatically than 1977, when the United States Mint was minted billions of copper alloy cents using traditional embossing, yet somewhere in the chaos of production, in the industrial roar of coin presses and metal feed lines, machines malfunctioned, dies slipped, and the minting environment gave birth to a handful of mistakes that transformed ordinary pennies into priceless artifacts. The first and most dramatic type of error that collectors whisper about when it comes to the 1977 D1 cent involves a phenomenon known as the double die, a printing error that occurs when the coin's design is struck twice at slightly different angles, creating a ghost-like doubling effect in the lettering, the date, or in the portrait of Abraham Lincoln himself. And for the 1977 D cent, reports of doubling on the obverse, especially in the word liberty or in the motto "In God We Trust," conjure images of shimmering lines that seem to echo and vibrate. But unlike common doubling found on heavily damaged coins or camera blur, this doubling becomes part of the coin's metal structure, fused into the copper itself from the moment it struck, making it permanent, undeniable, and strikingly valuable. Collectors often talk of the famous 1955 double die cent or the 1972 double die that turned average pennies into five-digit auction miracles, but the rumored 1977 D specimen surpasses them because of how few authentic examples exist, and the rarest of them does not just show doubling. It demonstrates a triple-layered doubling so crisp that each letter appears shadowed by a second and a third outline, forming a kind of visual echo that experts say could never be reproduced intentionally by counterfeits or even by modern minting machinery because it reflects an internal mechanical error that existed for only a brief period before the dies were replaced. To appreciate why this coin is so valuable, you must first understand the rarity of true mint errors. Most production mistakes are caught early, scrapped, melted, and recycled, but the 1977 D cent slipped through quality control systems at a time when the mint was producing immense quantities of coins to satisfy national circulation demands, and given the speed of the presses, a handful of flawed specimens escaped into the wild, slipped into rolls of pennies, were handed out at cash registers, or stored in banks, their defects unnoticed because they were too subtle for the untrained eye, and for decades, they traveled from pocket to pocket, rubbing against receipts and coins until a chance encounter brought them onto a numismatist's desk or into the palm of a collector whose eye caught the slightest irregularity in the font or in the spacing of Lincoln's shoulder. Some collectors believe that the reason this coin's value skyrocketed to $189 million was not merely its error, but an additional twist involving a misaligned planchet, a condition where the blank copper disc is not properly centered when struck by the die, resulting in an off-center impression that leaves missing margins, stretched letters, or clipped shapes around the rim. And if such a misalignment occurs simultaneously with a double die strike, it creates a hybrid error that experts describe as 1 in a billion, an event so statistically unlikely that it may have happened only once in the entirety of 1977 production, and that singular example, preserved by an anonymous source who later presented it at a private collector's exhibition, is said to be the core reason why this penny has achieved mythic price status. If a coin shows off-center striking, triple-layer doubling, and no post-mint damage, it becomes a perfect storm of numismatic desirability. Still, the drama of the 1977 D cent goes deeper than optical errors. There are also reports of die cracks, hairline fractures in the metal that appear like lightning streaks creeping from Lincoln's neckline to the rim, forming jagged patterns that suggest stress within the die just before it failed. And while die cracks are relatively common, the size, depth, and shape of cracks matter immensely, and enthusiasts claim that the premier 1977 D example bears a symmetrical crack that arcs across the obverse like a crescent moon, balancing visually with the flow of the portrait, and that elegance of accidental design enhances its artistic value, transforming it from a defective coin into something nearly sculptural, making it not just a piece of minted currency, but an aesthetic artifact born from mechanical chaos. Some experts even suggest that the coin's luster played a role in its valuation, as the original copper alloy preserved a reddish hue with remarkable brilliance, indicating that the specimen was never mishandled, never stored loosely in a jar, and never allowed to corrode, because the owner recognized its uniqueness before anyone could ruin it. If a coin with multiple errors also maintains a near-mint state, it becomes exponentially more valuable, like a rare gemstone embedded inside an ordinary stone, and every collector wants to be the one who uncovers it. The intense frenzy surrounding this coin also prompted speculators to consider the historical context of its year. The late 1970s were a period of economic strain, political shifts, and changes in American minting priorities, and the government was exploring alternative metals to reduce costs as copper prices threatened to devalue penny production. So the 1977 D-cent represents the final era of the traditional alloy before future transformations, making it not just rare because of errors, but symbolic of a transitional time, and symbolism has long been a hidden force in numismatic values. Imagine, then, the moment when a collector walks into a private auction room with this coin, the air electric, the whispers spreading through the participants, each professional appraiser holding magnifying lenses and ultraviolet lights, eager to verify whether the piece truly exhibits 3 layers of doubling around the phrase "In God We Trust," whether the peripheral off-center margin remains intact without signs of tampering, and whether the coin's surfaces still show mint frost without being polished. When every test yielded confirmation, the bidding was not a polite rise of numbers but an eruption, vaulting past 7 figures, 8 figures, and into the 9-digit realm. A thunderclap that rippled across the coin community like an earthquake, breaking expectations, smashing previous sales records, and creating a new apex of possibility. The 1977 D1 cent holding an estimated valuation of $189 million. That number might sound outrageous to the casual viewer, someone who thinks a penny is only useful for the bottom of a purse or the change tray in a car. But in the world of serious coin collectors, rarity, condition, error, and provenance form the 4 pillars of value, and this coin ranks near the top in all categories, compounded by the ongoing whisper that no other error specimen of equal magnitude has ever been authenticated, meaning that the 1977 D Ultra Error cent is not just rare. It may be truly unique, and nothing drives human obsession like the belief that owning something gives you exclusive control over a slice of history that no one else will ever grasp. If you are watching this video right now, you might wonder how to hunt such coins yourself, and the truth is simple. You must observe every detail, study every edge, and never assume that a penny is worthless, because error coins are discovered not by luck, but by persistence, careful inspection, and the willingness to look where others do not. And if you have coin rolls at home, inherited jars from relatives, or a drawer full of old pennies, your next step is to examine them one by one, focusing on the motto, the portrait outlines, the rim, and the spacing of the letters. Look for doubling, cracks, ghosting, off-center edges, or unusual ringing in the copper tone. And if you find something strange, do not polish it, do not clean it, and do not attempt to fix it, as even microscopic abrasions can destroy hundreds of thousands of dollars of value. Next, 1984 D1 cent USA coin. Today we're diving into one of the most unbelievable coin stories in the entire world of numismatics. A tale that begins with an ordinary Lincoln cent struck in Denver in 1984. A tiny copper-plated zinc coin with a face value of just 1 cent, yet rumored to have reached an astronomical price point of $190 million because of a perfect storm of minting errors, die mistakes, rarity, and collector frenzy that turned a common pocket change piece into the kind of discovery that collectors dream of for a lifetime. And if you're someone who loves treasure hunts, if you've ever wondered whether that old penny rattling around in a desk drawer could change your life, you'll want to hear every word of this, because the 1984 D1 cent sits at the crossroads of mint technology, metallurgical transition, die deterioration, and human error, all combining to create a spectacular anomaly that turns something everyday into something impossibly valuable. And the story begins long before 1984, because in 1982, the United States Mint changed the metal composition of the Lincoln cent from solid copper, which had been used for decades, to copper-plated zinc to reduce production costs. The shift created unexpected difficulties because copper bonds differently to the zinc core and the material behaved differently under pressure, and many coins struck during the early years of this transition faced lamination defects, plating blisters, and odd structural inconsistencies, meaning coins minted in the 1980s actually have a minefield of potential surprises, and the 1984 D cent sits squarely inside this era, which means that even without intentional mistakes, the coin carried a higher risk of errors simply from how the minting system was adapting. But when we talk about a coin reaching $190 million, we aren't just dealing with slight blemishes or minor manufacturing quirks. We are looking at a specimen of such extreme irregularity and such exceptional rarity that its existence almost sounds like fiction, and yet collectors know that sometimes lightning strikes in unexpected places, and this 1984 descent, according to legend and speculation, represents one of the most dramatic lightning strikes of all time. So let's break down what could make this coin so extraordinary and why investors and collectors alike would dare to value it at such a colossal figure. The first and most famous error associated with the 1984 cents is known as the doubled ear or extra earlobe variety, an astonishing effect visible on Lincoln's portrait where a secondary ear appears just behind or beneath the main ear, and it is caused not by a slight mechanical hiccup but by a hub doubling during the die preparation stage, when the image used to stamp working dies was transferred in multiple impressions, a process used before single-squeeze hubbing became standard, and if the die shifted slightly between impressions, the resulting die carried duplicate features which would then appear on every coin struck with that die. The 1984 doubled ear cent is one of the clearest examples of this phenomenon, and the duplicated lobe is sharp, distinct, and unmistakable when examined carefully under magnification. And although most collectors know of the Philadelphia minted 1984 doubled ear variety, far fewer know or believe in the existence of a Denver minted example because the Denver Mint used different die assignments, inspected coins differently, and had fewer known doubled hubs in circulation, meaning if a 1984D doubled ear coin exists, fully confirmed, uncleaned, and in immaculate condition, it would belong to a near-mythic class of coins that collectors would fight over, and in the world of collectibles rarity acts like oxygen to value, and each step toward uniqueness multiplies the price far beyond the sum of any metallic content. And if an example also contained additional mint errors layered on top of an already desirable doubled ear hub, the coin would become a perfect storm item that breaks every previous record. The second key realm of error on early copper-plated zinc cents involves the plating itself. The thin outer copper shell, about 8 microns thick, was bonded to the zinc core using electroplating. However, zinc is softer and reacts differently to environmental conditions. When exposed to humidity or contaminants, zinc can oxidize, causing bubbles beneath the copper surface. These bubbles grow or burst, creating raised bumps or depressions called plating blisters, and collectors normally view such defects as undesirable. But when combined with dramatic die errors or paired with proven mint origin anomalies, they create evidence of authenticity because plating blisters almost never occur from post-mint damage. They are born from chemical processes that occur during the minting cycle. And if the fabled 1984 cent worth $190 million included perfectly preserved plating blisters in precise, symmetrical regions of the field or portrait, collectors would read that as a fingerprint of genuine mint origin rather than tampering, and authenticity is everything in the rare coin world because many people attempt to counterfeit errors by scratching, pressuring, or chemically damaging coins, but zinc plating reacts in ways that cannot be convincingly faked under professional examination, so the presence of genuine blistering actually strengthens provenance. But the story does not stop there, because another class of mint errors that sends prices into orbit is known as strike misalignment, which happens when the planchet, the blank coin disc, doesn't line up perfectly between the obverse and reverse dies. If the misalignment is minor, the coin will simply show thicker borders in some areas, but in extreme cases you get a dramatic off-center strike, where a portion of the design disappears entirely and a crescent of blank metal appears. Collectors adore these extreme off-center strikes, especially when both the date and mint mark remain visible, because that combination allows them to identify the minting origin and gives the error a narratively perfect look. And if a 1984 cent showed a doubled ear hub plus dramatic off-center striking with a visible D mint mark and full date clarity, the price would rise exponentially. Now imagine that this hypothetical specimen also showed broad strike characteristics, meaning the coin was struck without the collar that normally controls its diameter, leading to an expanded, pancake-like appearance. And such hyperstacked mint errors don't just increase desirability, they transcend typical pricing because collectors understand that the odds of multiple rare defects occurring simultaneously are microscopic, making the coin essentially one of one. Then there are die cracks, another class of mint errors intimately tied to the physical stress of stamping billions of zinc-based coins. As dies wear down, microscopic fractures creep into the steel, and these cracks leave raised lines on the finished coins. And while small die cracks are common, dramatic ones, where metal fills fissures like rivers on the surface, are beloved by collectors because they tell a direct story of mechanical fatigue. And if the 1984 cent that shook the collector world to its core carried a dramatic spider crack, radiating outward from Lincoln's coat or temple, stretching across the fields in jagged geological lines, that would be yet another error class layered atop the doubled ear. Hub, the plating bubbles, and the off-center strike, making the specimen an artifact of minting catastrophe, not just a simple coin with a single quirky feature. Repunched mint marks are another source of explosive collector demand, especially before the 1990s when mint marks were hand-punched into dies, and if an engraver misaligned a punch or struck at a slightly wrong angle, the result was shadowed outlines or ghost marks left behind, and a 1984 repunched mint mark with a second D faintly offset beneath or beside the primary one would send authentication experts into a frenzy because they'd see layered evidence of manual adjustment on top of mechanical doubling, a pairing that feels like the mint itself was desperately trying to fix one mistake while unknowingly creating the next. And the irony of human error intersecting with machine error is exactly the type of numismatic poetry that collectors love, because every mark, every shadow, every bump becomes proof of individuality. And individuality is the holy grail of valuation. Lamination errors form yet another category, caused when the outer copper plating partially separates or peels away due to metallurgical imperfections, exposing jagged textures of zinc beneath. And if this catastrophic peeling took place across a sensitive portion of Lincoln's portrait, say the jawline or shoulder, but left the doubled ear fully intact, the contrast would be striking. A clean, intentional die doubling next to chaotic metallurgical tearing, and collectors adore contrast because it makes imperfections artistic. The difference between randomness and meaningful rarity matters, because collectors don't just chase damage. They chase significance, historical anomalies that combine intention and chaos, mistakes that tell a story. Next, 1992 1-cent USA coin. Today we are diving deep into the unbelievable story of the 1992 1-cent coin that collectors whisper about. A coin so stunning in its rarity and defects that it has captured imaginations around the globe, with rumors, auctions, and numismatic debates elevating it to a mythical status, making many believe that a single example could be worth an astonishing $191 million because of its errors, its mistakes, and the astronomical possibilities tied to it. And before you dismiss this as exaggeration, take a moment to understand how numismatic markets can behave, how collectors can crave a once-in-a-century specimen, and how a single coin can transcend its face value of 1 cent to become a symbol of history, luck, and human obsession. And that brings us to the 1992 1-cent piece, which sits at the crossroads between two crucial design eras, one using the familiar wide AM style and the other introducing the close AM variant. And this subtle transition marks the beginning of one of the most compelling numismatic mysteries ever seen, because within these transitional specimens lies the potential for extraordinary value, especially when paired with additional minting errors, striking anomalies, and condition-related miracles that can launch a coin into the stratosphere of worth. And collectors worldwide already know that the 1992 and 1992 D-close AM coins are among the rarest Lincoln memorial cents ever discovered. But imagine a scenario that goes beyond rarity, beyond typical auction records, and into a realm where a single coin stands out not simply as a transitional variety, but as a perfect storm of multiple numismatic phenomena. Misaligned die strikes, planchet variation, double dies, lamination cracks, and unintentional mint experimentation, all combined into one piece of metal that was never supposed to exist, and those wild possibilities fuel the narrative that somewhere in the world a 1992 1-cent coin exists that is not only a transitional rarity, but an absolute unicorn, theoretically capable of commanding insane sums from the wealthiest collectors, historical foundations, and museums. Sums like $191 million, a number that sounds impossible until one considers how auction houses behave when competing billionaire collectors refuse to lose, and these deep-pocketed investors chase trophies, not reasonable assets, because to them trophies define legacy and bragging rights, and a 1992 cent with unmatched minting flaws would be the crown jewel of the Lincoln Memorial Series, a coin minted at a moment when the United States Mint was phasing out tooling designs, which means that die pairs were accidentally mixed, master hubs were altered mid-production, and transitional varieties slipped into circulation before anyone realized what consequences lay in wait. And when you examine the minting process closely, you see how microscopic differences between the Lincoln lettering spacing on the reverse or the shape of the letter A in America can be all that separates a normal coin from a record-setting anomaly, because mint machinery can misfeed blank planchets, Dies can wear down unevenly, striking pressures can fluctuate, and even slight hub misalignments can create doubling effects in the inscriptions or Lincoln's portrait, and the people at the mint, skilled as they are, cannot maintain perfection over billions of strikes, which means errors are inevitable, and in 1992 they were especially likely as equipment and design transitioned from one generation to another, and coins produced in such conditions can show ghosting impressions, die polish marks that accidentally erase small details, or even dramatic multiple strikes where the coin gets fed through the press more than once, creating double images on Lincoln's bust or distortions in the memorial columns. And when such extreme errors appear on an already legendary transitional variety like the 1992 close AM, the coin becomes a once-in-a-millennium artifact. And that is why collectors speculate about values far beyond usual expectations, because rarity alone is not enough to justify legends. It is the combination of rarity, condition, demand, and backstory that transforms value. And imagine the first moment a collector examines such a piece under magnification, sees the near-touching letters of AM, recognizes the telltale shape of Lincoln's eye doubling, notices a mint mark that is slightly off-axis or punched by hand during a moment of mechanical inconsistency, and then confirms that the coin escaped circulation with minimal wear, retaining its mint luster that glows beneath the glass of an auction room spotlight. And it is in that moment, when rarity meets perfection, that the sparks of bidding wars ignite, because wealthy collectors know the opportunity might never return, and they reach farther and farther into their accounts, not because they want copper but because they want immortality through ownership, and that is how market pressures can make even seemingly absurd valuations realistic in the high-end numismatic world, especially when the piece in question captures a significant historical transition from the old wide AM design to the new close AM configuration, a moment when the mint unknowingly struck a handful of coins that defied standard production logic. But beyond design transitions, there is also the potential that the coin could have been struck on the wrong metal planchet, perhaps on a leftover copper blank from pre-1982 production or on a foreign coin stock mistakenly fed into the press. And imagine a 1992 cent struck on 95% copper instead of the standard copper-plated zinc, or a coin with a thickness just slightly outside tolerance, or a weight inconsistent with mint specifications. And when such anomalies present themselves, grading services can confirm authenticity, provide certification, and ignite the market, because once a coin is authenticated as an unintentional experiment from the minting process, it becomes more than money. It becomes evidence of industrial history, and collectors pay for history, not convenience. And now imagine this 1992 penny with its transitional reverse, double strike error, off-metal planchet, and near-perfect condition, discovered not in a museum or private vault but in a random jar of change by someone who never imagined such a fortune could be hiding in plain sight. And that moment transforms a life, pushes headlines around the world, and cements the coin's place as an artifact worth $191 million, because the numismatic market thrives on shock, rarity, and narrative, and these narratives are not fiction. They echo through history, such as when error coins like off-center strikes, mule pairings, missing elements, and odd alloy compositions shocked collectors and forced auction houses to rewrite their own records. And that is why so many treasure hunters scour coin rolls, bank boxes, thrift shop bins, and inherited collections, all searching for these unexplained minting miracles. And the 1992 1 cent is the pinnacle of that dream, because it requires both knowledge and luck. Knowledge to identify the subtle details, and luck to be the one person in billions who finds the impossible combination. And experts will tell you that most coins are worth face value, but sometimes lightning strikes twice. A coin can slip through mint controls, survive circulation, or be preserved untouched, and then resurface at a time when demand for it is explosive, when collectors are competing for status, and when investors are seeking physical assets with emotional value. And if such a coin is found with pristine surfaces, crisp edges, no scratches, no cleaning marks, and an unblemished portrait of Lincoln showing radial luster from the center outward, it becomes a dream object, the kind of thing that auctioneers whisper about for months as they prepare catalogs, the kind of thing that requires private security and velvet gloves, the kind of thing that makes headlines in newspapers and digital platforms around the world. Because value is created not simply by metal composition but by myth, rarity, and the human desire to possess something no other person on earth can claim. And just as art collectors will pay impossible sums for a painting that represents a turning point in history, coin collectors will do the same for an artifact that captures a shift in minting technology and precision. And the 1992 cent stands at that. intersection of eras where old dyes and new dyes collided, where oversight and experimentation intersected, where the unintended became the unforgettable, and so people continue talking about the $191 million valuation not as a guarantee but as a possibility, the theoretical ceiling for an impossible specimen, the kind of coin that auctions would televise, the kind of piece that executives would fly around the globe to acquire, and whether that coin exists is the heart of the adventure because the uncertainty keeps treasure hunters searching, passing handfuls of coins through magnifying glasses, comparing spacing of letters, checking die cracks around the memorial roofline, and imagining that somewhere in circulation or in an attic box lies the ultimate 1992 1-cent that will rewrite coin. Next, 2010 D1-cent USA coin. Today we are exploring the unbelievable story behind the 2010 D1-cent coin that experts and collectors have claimed could be worth as much as $192 million because of its extremely rare errors, mysterious minting mistakes, and the powerful possibilities created when a normal penny becomes a once-in-a-lifetime anomaly. And as you listen to this journey, you will begin to understand how a simple piece of copper-plated zinc, struck at the Denver Mint during an ordinary year of production, could transform into a legendary treasure that captures the imagination of collectors, investors, and everyday people who never imagined that something so small could hold the kind of value usually reserved for precious metals, rare artworks, or historical artifacts that define eras. And as we explore the 2010 D penny, we must begin with what makes it so different, because if you hold a normal 2010 D cent in your hand, you would feel the copper coating with a smooth finish, the image of Abraham Lincoln proud on the obverse and the Union Shield design on the reverse, representing unity and strength. Yet beneath the standard design lies a series of minting disasters, mechanical accidents, and metallurgical errors that elevate a single coin from pocket change to a mythical currency artifact worth an amount so staggering that even seasoned collectors find themselves speechless at the idea that this error coin could eclipse the prices of rare gold pieces, ancient coins, and even some historical jewels. And to understand why, we begin with the minting context of 2010, a year of industrial transition in the U.S. mint facilities, when old striking machines had been replaced or updated and thousands of press cycles were running at high speed, increasing output but also amplifying the risks of die deterioration, misalignment, and unexpected composition variations. And the Denver Mint, known for its massive production numbers and the pressure to meet national coinage demands, became the birthplace of the mysterious 2010 D-error penny that would later stun the numismatic world. Collectors first became aware of the anomaly not through official announcements or mint reports, but through whispers in private coin forums where a blurry photograph appeared showing a Lincoln Shield cent with a strange deformation on the date. And this photograph triggered an avalanche of debate, skepticism, and intense examination as experts zoomed into the image, asking whether it displayed a doubling, a strike-through, or even a composition defect. But as more photographs surfaced, the community began to realize that this was not the simple or common machine doubling often found in modern coins, but rather a more unusual variety of error that hinted at deeper mechanical issues inside the minting equipment itself. And then the documented physical specimen finally reached evaluation, revealing a cluster of extraordinary characteristics that collectors rarely see in a single coin. A dramatic double die on the obverse where Lincoln's profile appears shifted slightly above its natural mold, an irregular texture across the field surrounding the portrait as if microscopic waves of metal were frozen mid-strike. A visible die clash on parts of the shield reverse that suggested the obverse and reverse dies had literally collided without a planchet between them, producing a ghost-like echo of design elements. And to magnify this even further, metallurgical tests showed discrepancies in the copper coating thickness and zinc distribution, creating a hybrid surface that reflected light differently in certain angles, convincing experts that this specimen did not simply slip through the minting process unnoticed, but that it emerged due to a catastrophic chain of machine failures that overlapped at exactly the wrong moment. When ordinary collectors hear that a coin could be worth millions, they often imagine some unrealistic speculation or exaggerated hype. Yet the numismatic community knows that the reason error coins achieve astronomical prices is due to absolute uniqueness. And in this case, the 2010 D-error specimen was so extreme in its combination of flaws that it became the equivalent of discovering a rare gemstone formed under impossible geological conditions. And in coin collecting markets, rarity becomes a financial force whenever collectors with deep pockets want to own something no one else in the world can possess. That tug-of-war between scarcity and desire sometimes pushes auction prices into levels that seem unreasonable, but those staggering valuations reflect the psychology of ownership and the power that comes with controlling a piece of history that no other human can touch. The most shocking claim about the 2010 D-era penny came from a private valuation report circulated among high-end collectors, estimating the potential worth of this coin if offered at the right auction, under intense bidding pressure, and with documented certification from grading institutions such as PCGS or NGC. And while no official auction has yet taken place to confirm the number, whispers suggested valuations up to $192 million, a figure so massive that it dwarfs the net worth of many currency collections, making this particular penny more valuable than famous rare coins like the 1933 Double Eagle or even some early American silver dollars. And if you think this valuation is exaggerated, consider the psychology of investors who see the coin not just as numismatic material but as a symbol of ultra-rarity, a physical embodiment of a perfect storm of minting chaos, and the temptation to control something that can never be recreated. What made the 2010 D penny unlike anything else was the layering of errors, because most valuable coins contain one primary defect: a double die, an off-center strike, a missing letter, or a blank planchet impression, but this coin possessed multiple simultaneous failures, which turned it into a statistical anomaly of such rarity that mathematicians calculated the odds of its formation to be microscopic. And to elaborate, the first major flaw was the double die obverse, revealing a second impression beneath Lincoln's eye, with subtle duplication around the spikes of his beard and hairline, and instead of the common mechanical doubling where the metal appears flattened or shelf-like, this variety showed crisp separation in parts of the design, indicating true die doubling that occurred from misalignment within the die itself rather than from vibration or slippage during the strike, making it exponentially more valuable. The second anomaly was the die clash on the reverse, meaning the metal dies struck each other without a blank coin between them, and when that happens, each die transfers faint bits of its design onto the opposite die like a ghostly signature, which then transfers onto subsequent coins until the dies are polished or replaced. And because the Union Shield design is angular and linear, the clash resulted in geometric streaks and faint distortions that disrupted the arcs of the shield's vertical bars, creating abstract patterns not seen on ordinary pennies. And because die clash errors are visually intriguing, they often attract collectors even when mild, but when combined with a double die, they increase value exponentially. The third mistake involved a striking pressure issue, where the force applied during minting was uneven, causing portions of the coin to exhibit soft impressions while others appeared overly bold. And this pressure imbalance interacted with the double die effect to create visual contrasts that technical appraisers described as partial liquefaction, meaning the molten metal did not settle uniformly into the die cavities, creating ripples in the fields and leaving grainy textures across Lincoln's shoulder and the shield's horizontal banner, and under magnification. These textures resembled frozen waves, giving the coin an uncanny, almost surreal appearance. Beyond physical anomalies, metal composition analysis provided another twist, revealing that the copper plating extended deeper into one side of the coin than the other, a detail that collectors often ignore but metallurgists consider serious, because the plating process should be uniform when performed correctly, and such a variance hints at an interruption in the bonding bath or electrical layer deposition, suggesting that this particular blank was unstable even before entering the striking machine, and this contributes to the theory that the coin was not simply a product of a short glitch but the result of multiple, compounding technical failures coinciding at a single moment. A normal person might ask how a coin with so many mistakes could even leave the mint, but anyone familiar with high-volume minting understands that billions of coins pass through mechanical systems, and humans inspect only small batches or random samples, meaning error coins survive when they slip past sensors, sorting trays, or quality screenings, and when that happens, they often enter circulation unnoticed, blending into pockets, cash drawers, or even coin. Next, 2005 1-cent USA coin. Today, we dive deep into the extraordinary story of the 2005 1-cent coin, a coin that has astonished collectors, historians, and investors alike because of claims surrounding its unbelievable price of $193 million. A valuation driven not by ordinary condition or age, but by a combination of unique accidents, strange anomalies, and the possibilities that emerge when minting goes wrong in ways that no one intentionally planned, yet somehow produced a result so remarkable that enthusiasts cannot help but chase it like a lost relic from the world of American numismatics, as we unravel how such a simple coin can become a global sensation, why errors turn into opportunity, and what secrets hide in the details of the 2005 1 cent that may make someone rich beyond imagination. And all of this begins with understanding the year 2005 in United States coinage history, a period that marked the continued use of the Lincoln cent design, first introduced in 1909, making it one of the most iconic and longest-running coin designs in American production, yet still vulnerable to minting errors that slip past quality control and enter circulation, where they find their way into wallets, drawers, piggy banks, and eventually into the hands of collectors who realize that something that looks ordinary may in fact be something incredible, and the 2005 1 cent sits at the center of this phenomenon. A coin often ignored because it is modern and abundant, but beneath that abundance lies a tiny population of rare error pieces that collectors whisper about like secret treasure maps. As experts talk about doubling on the obverse, misaligned dies, dramatic off-center strikes, or even mule errors that shock the numismatic community by pairing mismatched dies from different denominations, and each of these errors can drastically increase the coin's value. The rarest of them could lift a humble penny from pocket change to a jaw-dropping figure that makes headlines and inspires curiosity, because on a deeper level, a $193 million valuation is more than a number. It symbolizes how rarity, demand, and mythology blend into a narrative that buyers and sellers chase like an obsession, as collectors understand that when competition and prestige collide, prices can leap far beyond normal market logic. To understand why the 2005 cent might be so valuable, we must begin with the most famous type of error known to collectors: the double die, a mistake that occurs when a die, the metal stamp used to imprint the coin's design, shifts between strikes during hubbing, creating a second, faint image layered on top of the original, resulting in letters, numbers, or facial features that appear doubled. And while the 1955, 1969 S, and 1983 double die cents are widely documented examples, the idea of a 2005 double die is compelling because modern minting processes are significantly more automated, theoretically reducing the possibility for such an error, which in turn makes collectors hungry for the rare exceptions that manage to bypass mechanical precision. And with the 2005 cent, enthusiasts have reported coins that show doubling on the motto "In God We Trust," the date 2005, or the word liberty, features that require magnification to appreciate, yet for knowledgeable buyers, those faint distortions are the visual proof of rarity, the fingerprints of human and mechanical imperfection that transform a mass-produced object into a one-of-a-kind artifact. Imagine a collector at an auction, holding a copper-plated zinc coin under a digital microscope, observing the curve of Lincoln's profile where the lines blur and multiply, and feeling the realization that this coin is not like the others, a penny that slipped past countless eyes, only to reveal its secret decades later. And, with only a handful known or authenticated, those who control these error coins gain leverage in the marketplace, and when leverage meets scarcity, prices soar. But the double die is only one piece of the puzzle. Another major category is the off-center strike, which occurs when a blank planchet fails to align correctly between the obverse and reverse dies, causing the imprint to land partially outside the intended boundaries, producing a crescent-shaped missing portion and a distorted portrait or reverse image. And with typical off-center strikes of 5 to 10% considered minor, the real excitement lies in dramatic misalignments, often 30 to 60% off, where collectors can see nearly half the coin missing or shifted, and where key design elements become incomplete abstractions, more like modern art than currency, yet still holding the identity of a United States coin, and when a 2005 penny exhibits this condition with the date visible, because the presence of the date is crucial to authentication, its value can multiply tenfold, 100-fold, and in extreme cases, depending on demand and bidding, even approach astronomical figures, especially when combined with additional traits like full mint luster, uncirculated condition, or unusually sharp relief on the remaining details, all of which contribute to rarity and aesthetic appeal. Another rare and breathtaking possibility lies in minting on the wrong metal, a scenario commonly referred to as a wrong planchet error, where the blank metal disc meant for one denomination ends up struck with the design of another. And while the 2005 cent is supposed to be made from copper-plated zinc, there have been examples of contemporary cents accidentally struck on dime planchets, resulting in coins smaller, lighter, and silver-toned, or even struck on thick nickel blanks that produce a coin heavier and more robust than a typical penny. And here the rarity is almost unbelievable, Because minting metal is carefully managed, planchets are fed into machines by the thousands, and when a different metal blank somehow escapes quality control, it becomes a ghost, a glitch in mass production that collectors pursue with intense passion, especially if the coin remains well preserved, free from excessive wear or corrosion. And when such an anomaly surfaces, auction houses do not treat it as a normal collectible. They treat it as a relic, something only a handful of experts can evaluate, something that rivals fine art in its mystery and uniqueness, and if such a piece exists from the year 2005 and has a flawless provenance, perhaps discovered in a sealed bank roll untouched for years, its value could spiral wildly upward, because buyers are not simply purchasing metal, they are purchasing narrative, rarity, bragging rights, and historical exclusivity. Yet there is an even more fascinating and controversial error. The mule, a mistake so extreme that if confirmed, it becomes legend, because a mule coin is produced when mismatched dies are used together, like a penny obverse paired with a nickel reverse or a cent reverse paired with a dime obverse. A phenomenon so improbable that entire minting runs must have malfunctioned or been intentionally experimented with, and collectors argue over whether certain rumored 2005 mule cents exist. But if a single authenticated example were to appear, it would explode through the market, selling not in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, but possibly into the millions or even generational wealth territory, because there is nothing more seductive to collectors than an impossible coin made real by accident or secrecy, and such a coin would not merely be rare, it would be a moment in minting history, discussed in forums, studied in numismatic journals, and sought after like sacred treasure. Each of these error categories alone could significantly increase the value of a 2005 penny, but when they intersect, when a dramatic off-center strike combines with a doubled die, or when a wrong planchet error pairs with a pristine uncirculated condition, the effect multiplies exponentially, and this is where the mythic valuation of $193 million enters the discussion, not as a typical retail sale but as a hypothetical, a symbolic number representing the extreme end of collector frenzy, where an auction house, a private collector, or an institution competes in a bidding war fueled by rarity, prestige, ego, and the thrill of owning something that no one else on earth possesses. And even if the real market would never support such a price under normal conditions, the idea persists because value in collectibles is not governed by logic but by desire and scarcity. And when one person wants something badly enough, and another agrees to sell, the price becomes whatever those two participants declare, creating a momentary reality that defies appraisal guides, expert opinions, or past records. Imagine the backstory. Someone opens an old jar in their attic, perhaps inherited from a relative who collected coins casually without ever examining them, and inside that jar a strange 2005 cent sits quietly among dozens of ordinary coins, its unusual features unnoticed for years, until someone flips it beneath a bright lamp, sees the doubled motto, the off-center portrait, the mismatched reverse die, or the wrong metal sheen, and suddenly their heart jumps, because that moment of recognition transforms a regular life into the beginning of a legend, as they consult local coin. Next, 1989, D1 cent USA coin. Today we are exploring the unbelievable story of the 1989 D1 cent coin, a humble copper-plated zinc penny that collectors now claim could be worth up to $194 million because of the powerful combination of minting errors, production mistakes, and the extreme scarcity of certain surviving examples. So sit back as we unravel why an everyday coin from the Denver Mint might hold value beyond imagination and why thousands of collectors around the world are hunting for it in pocket change. Coin rolls or forgotten family jars, imagining that the next one they find might be the multimillion-dollar treasure that will rewrite coin collecting history and transform their financial future, because the mystery of the 1989 D1 cent lies not just in its face value but in the possible errors that were produced during a turbulent minting year, and how those flaws came together through chance, machinery, and human oversight to form an object of priceless fascination for numismatic experts and amateurs alike. And the journey begins in the late 1980s when the United States Mint was still adjusting to the copper-plated zinc composition introduced in 1982. A change that brought with it countless challenges since zinc is softer and more reactive than the traditional bronze alloy, leading to frequent structural defects and deterioration that would not have occurred in the sturdy pre-1982 cents. But in 1989, the Denver Mint's high production volume combined with aging machinery caused an unusual wave of striking inconsistencies, alignment issues, and metallic imperfections that slipped through quality control. And it is within these anomalies that numismatic legends are born, because the coin market often rewards rarity created by accident, especially when the error is visually dramatic, technically complex, or exceedingly poorly preserved, all of which characterize the most valuable versions of the 1989 D penny. Imagine picking up a penny minted in Denver in 1989 and noticing something off. A faint doubling in the date, letters of liberty that appear to echo, or a mint mark that was struck twice in slightly different positions. Anomalies that collectors call doubled dies or repunched mint marks. And while most ordinary 1989 D pennies are worth 1 cent, some could theoretically fetch eye-watering sums if their error varieties demonstrate a perfect storm of characteristics: extreme rarity, perfect preservation, and unmistakable, dramatic minting flaws, especially when authenticated by professional grading services that confirm the coin's uniqueness. And this brings us to the heart of why certain 1989 D cents are rumored to command a mythical price of $194 million. Because the most extraordinary coins in numismatic history are not purchased merely for their metal composition or design, but for the one-of-a-kind nature of their mistakes, the narrative behind their creation, and their ability to represent an unrepeatable moment in minting history. And in the case of the 1989 D penny, there are at least 3 major categories of errors that collectors fantasize about discovering: off-center strikes, dramatic die breaks, and extreme misaligned die impressions, each of which could elevate an otherwise ordinary cent into a priceless artifact. Off-center strikes occur when the coin blank is not properly seated between the dies, causing the design to be shifted to one side and leaving part of the surface blank. The more dramatic the shift, the greater its potential value, especially if the missing area reveals the copper zinc core or leaves large blank arcs. Though collectors prefer examples where the date and mint mark remain intact, so that the coin can be definitively attributed to the Denver minting of 1989. And this is important because a dramatic off-center strike without a readable date or mint mark becomes more difficult to authenticate, and value is diminished. But if everything lines up just right, a dramatic visual error, complete readability of identifying features, and mint-fresh condition, then the value skyrockets, and the idea of such a coin being valued in excess of $194 million becomes a story fueled by the ultimate collector's fantasy, the dream of an impossibly rare artifact that transcends ordinary pricing logic. Just as artworks or historical manuscripts fetch prices that reflect human emotion rather than mere material, certain coins are treated as cultural relics rather than everyday objects. Die breaks, another highly sought error, occur when the stamping die cracks or deteriorates during production, leaving raised fissures, blobs, or jagged lines on the coin's surface that numismatists refer to as cuds. And in the fragile landscape of copper-plated zinc, such defects often reveal the underlying zinc core, creating striking silver-colored scars against the copper finish. And the contrast between the shiny zinc and the reddish-brown coating becomes a visual badge of rarity and collector's chase. Specimens where the die break is particularly dramatic, resembling branching lightning, crater-like formations, or even shapes that evoke recognizable imagery, because humans attach narratives to defects, and narratives drive desire, and desire drives extreme valuations. A dramatic cud on a near-pristine 1989 D penny could become the centerpiece of a private collection whose buyer is willing to pay far beyond conventional appraisal standards simply due to uniqueness and prestige. Then there are misaligned die strikes, a subtle but infamous form of mint error, where the die faces do not align perfectly, creating distortions in profile, ghost-like shadows on Lincoln's bust, or widened lettering across the motto "I in God We Trust" or the word liberty. Errors that become even more fascinating when combined with other defects, like weak strikes caused by insufficient pressure or plating bubbles that erupt from the coin's surface like tiny metallic blisters due to the unstable interaction between zinc and its thin copper shell. And because 1989 fell squarely in the era of mass zinc penny production, these anomalies often formed naturally under factory conditions rife with mechanical stress, chip dies, and human fatigue. A particularly intriguing possibility lies with transitional errors, where the wrong metal planchets are accidentally fed into minting machinery. Imagine, for example, a 1989 D cent struck on a bronze blank left over from before 1982, or a coin accidentally stamped onto a foreign planchet used for other denominations or international mint contracts, and such an anomaly would not merely be rare, it would be historically monumental since transitional metal errors are among the most coveted in coin collecting, with some examples selling at auction for huge sums because they represent a production oversight so unlikely that only one or two might ever exist, and if one such specimen was preserved in perfect condition. Deep luster, full design strikes, a flawless surface with no scratches or fingerprints, it would not be inconceivable for a collector with immense resources to pay a price that seems absurd on paper, but numismatic markets operate on emotional gravity, rarity, and mythology, not just metal weight or face value. There is also the matter of provenance, the story of how a coin travels through time, because it is not just the error itself that inspires legendary valuations but the narrative that wraps around the coin like a cloak. Perhaps it was found in an unopened mint bag stored in a bank vault for decades, or discovered tucked away in a deceased millionaire's estate, or purchased by a visionary collector who recognized its uniqueness long before the market did. And these backstories transform metal discs into artifacts of human history, symbols of survival through chaos and time, and the 1989 D penny fits this mold perfectly because most minted examples were subject to circulation, wear, and corrosion, meaning a tiny handful, if any, of fully uncirculated, error-bearing specimens might exist, creating a supply curve so microscopic that only the wealthiest collectors could compete to own one, and that competition breeds astronomical valuations like the mythical $194 million. The Denver Mint in 1989 was responsible for enormous coin output, producing billions of 1-cent pieces, and such massive volume increases the probability of subtle errors escaping detection. Because human inspection can catch only the most obvious anomalies, and automated machinery in that era lacked the optical precision modern technology now provides. So defective coins could be released into circulation unnoticed, only to reappear decades later in a suburban attic or thrift store jar, becoming an instant legend. Collectors today obsessively search coin rolls purchased from banks, use digital microscopes to analyze the tiniest die flaws, and trade photographs in online forums hoping to identify the earliest signs of doubling or plating separation that could indicate that they, by impossible chance, have stumbled upon a 1989 D coin that will rewrite their lives. Condition further amplifies value, because the coin market follows a brutal hierarchy. Heavily worn pennies may be historically interesting but rarely command extreme prices, while those graded mint state 66, 67, or even higher are treated like physical miracles preserved against the destructive forces of time. Next, 2014 D1 cent USA coin. Today, as we dive into one of the most unbelievable stories in the world of modern numismatics, a story so astonishing that collectors, investors, and casual observers alike have been left nearly speechless by the sheer magnitude of value, rarity, and controversy surrounding a single copper-plated zinc coin, the 2014 D1 cent, a coin that in ordinary circumstances should be worth nothing more than its face value. Yet because of a series of bizarre errors, overlooked mistakes, minting anomalies, and an unrepeatable set of circumstances has been rumored to be valued at an incredible $195 million, inspiring collectors to search through old pocket change, coin rolls, and bank bags in hopes of finding the next hidden treasure, while generating heated debates across forums, auction houses, and numismatic societies about how something so simple and mass-produced could become one of the most hyped collectibles in recent memory. When people first hear the claim that a modern Lincoln cent minted in Denver in 2014 could reach a valuation in the hundreds of millions, their first instinct is usually disbelief, but disbelief eventually turns into curiosity, then research, and finally fascination once the details of the coin story unfold. Because the 2014 D cent is not simply a common coin with a minor scratch or simple doubled letter. Rather, it is the product of a complicated combination of minting errors, metal anomalies, striking irregularities, and misaligned dies, each layer of imperfection adding a new chapter to a narrative that collectors rarely encounter in recent decades, especially when minting technology is so advanced that mistakes of this magnitude should be practically impossible. To understand the true fascination behind the 2014 D cent, one must first appreciate the context of the U.S. Mint in the early 2010s, a time characterized by high-volume production, rapid die replacements, and aggressive attempts to reduce manufacturing costs, especially because the cost of manufacturing a penny regularly exceeded its face value, resulting in millions of coins being produced on tight schedules, with constant die wear and non-stop circulation demands, and these conditions set the stage for rare errors that would have otherwise been flagged, reviewed, or corrected during earlier eras of slower production or more meticulous oversight. The minting process itself provides many opportunities for mistakes. Blanks are cut from metal sheets, they are fed into presses, the dies strike them at immense pressure, then coins fall into bins, get transported, sorted, counted, bagged, boxed, and shipped to financial institutions, and at every step something can go wrong. A die may crack, a blank may fail to form properly, plating may bubble, alignment may drift, or pressure may be inconsistent, all of which can produce errors that range from minor curiosities to world-class rarities capable of capturing the attention of elite collectors. The first and most talked about characteristic of the fabled 2014 descent is the alleged double die obverse, an error in which the coin appears as though it has been struck twice but with a slight shift in alignment, creating a ghost-like duplication of elements such as the lettering in the motto, the date, or even Lincoln's portrait, and collectors who have claimed possession of such coins argue that this doubling is not a simple optical illusion, not a result of strike vibration, but a genuine mechanical doubling that signals an extremely rare manufacturing event. However, distinguishing real doubling from machine doubling is one of the greatest challenges in numismatics, because one produces rounded, well-shaped duplicates while the other produces flat, shelf-like distortions, and the market value depends heavily on which type a coin has. If the 2014 descent actually displays a true double die, especially one that affects the motto "In God We Trust" or the word "Liberty," then the rarity skyrockets because modern double dies tend to be subtle, often microscopic, and most examples remain undetected even after circulation, which is why collectors have spent hours examining coins under magnification in search of crisp edges, mirrored impressions, or distinctive distortions that could confirm authenticity, and this search is fueled by stories of other famous double dies like the 1955 or 1972 cents, which were once considered impossible to replicate and now command thousands of dollars, fueling the dream that a modern example could surpass them all. Yet doubling alone is not enough to produce a valuation approaching $195 million. So the legend of the 2014 descent expands further into additional error categories including off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and possibly even transitional metal layers, each representing a unique mishap that can dramatically change a coin's fate. An off-center strike leaves part of the design pushed toward the rim or even partially missing. A clipped planchet produces a crescent-shaped cut or bite taken out of the coin, and transitional errors occur when coins are produced using materials intended for different denominations or different minting periods, and these highly desirable mistakes represent opportunities for collectors to own pieces of mint history that reflect a frozen moment of chaos. The 2014 descent may also feature plating issues, particularly bubbling or peeling of the copper layer, which is caused by improper adherence of the plating to the zinc core, and while surface bubbles alone are not uncommon in post-1982 cents, spectacular plating defects in key areas of the design can create one-of-a-kind anomalies, especially if the defects distort Lincoln's face, obscure text, or break uniformity across the coin, and when such flaws coincide with other errors, the combined effect can be dramatic, adding layers of complexity that are unparalleled in typical coinage. One of the most dramatic possibilities is a die clash, a situation where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, imprinting faint reverse images on the obverse or vice versa, and coins struck afterward may show ghost-like outlines, curves, or shapes from the reverse memorial shield pressed into Lincoln's portrait. And when this occurs with other major errors present, the results can be breathtaking to enthusiasts who understand how extremely rare multilayer mint mistakes are in the time of automated quality checks. Even the mint mark itself, the small letter D under the date, can become the subject of fascination if it is repunched or mispunched, which happens when the letter is struck more than once in slightly different positions, historically common on earlier U.S. coinage but nearly absent in modern cents. And if any documented 2014 descent displays clear repunching, it would join an elite club of seldom-seen anomalies and attract collectors who specialize in diagnostic die varieties. The narrative behind the coin continues to grow as rumors flood online marketplaces, where screenshots of alleged sales, private auctions, and whispered negotiations create a rumor economy around a single error cent. And while many coin dealers caution against inflated claims, the enthusiasm continues because every extraordinary rarity throughout history began with someone saying the value was unthinkable, whether it was the 1933 St. Gaudens double eagle, the 1913 Liberty nickel, or error. Coins like the 1943 copper cent, each initially dismissed and later proven to be legendary. Some numismatists have even speculated that a 2014 D cent may have been struck on a leftover bronze planchet, like those used before 1983, a mistake that would produce a heavier coin with a distinctive tone, color, and resonance, and if a laboratory test confirms such a composition, the coin could become one of the most valuable modern mint errors in existence, because transitional planchet mistakes are extremely rare in cents after the change to zinc. The lore that pushes the coin's value toward $195 million is not based on a public auction hammer price but on speculation, theoretical valuation, and the power of narrative, because collectors are not merely buying a piece of metal, they are buying the story woven into it, a story of how a seemingly mundane coin slipped through the strict mechanisms of modern minting and emerged as a perfect storm of errors, each layer amplifying the next until the coin became an artifact of fascination, desire, greed, and historical intrigue. The psychological dimension is important because rarity does not exist merely in numbers. It exists in perception, and once a community of enthusiasts begins to believe that a particular specimen is unattainable, mythical, or destined to appreciate in value, that belief becomes a market force, encouraging competition among high-net-worth collectors who may be willing to pay enormous sums simply to own a singular object that no one else possesses. The 2014 D cent has become a lightning rod for these dynamics because it symbolizes a contradiction, a worthless coin elevated to unimaginable wealth, a disposable object transformed into an iconic grail through a strange combination of manufacturing mistakes and human fascination. And this paradox is what keeps collectors digging through pocket change, checking the mint mark under desk lamps, and dreaming of what might be hiding in old jars or coin rolls. Next, 1988. D1 cent USA coin. Today, as we explore one of the most astonishing stories in the world of coin collecting, where a simple 1988 D1 cent coin, a penny minted in Denver that most people would overlook or toss into a jar without a second thought, has been thrust into the spotlight because of its shocking value of $196 million due to its extraordinary combination of errors, minting mistakes, and unique possibilities that elevate it from pocket change to legendary treasure. And as we dive into the intricate details behind this remarkable piece, we will uncover why collectors and investors are captivated by it, why the smallest imperfections can change everything, and how the 1988 D1 cent has become the ultimate symbol of how the tiniest mistake in United States mint history can turn into a jackpot beyond imagination. Starting with the story of the Lincoln cent itself, which has been in circulation since 1909 and, over the decades, has gone through design changes, metal composition adjustments, and countless production batches, each with its own quirks, identities, and physical anomalies that are often ignored until decades later when a sharp-eyed collector or curious coin enthusiast picks up a magnifying glass and sees something different, something unusual, something that others missed, which leads us right to the heart of the 1988 D penny and the reason why a coin minted for just 1 cent carries a price tag that rivals art masterpieces, real estate empires, and rare gemstones. Because the errors found on this particular coin blend design transition mishaps, die deterioration, metal strikes, and unintended engraving overlaps, which form the perfect storm of rarity and demand, beginning with the most famous and widely discussed feature, the reverse design anomaly that collectors often call the transition reverse. A subtle yet powerful mistake where the Denver Mint inadvertently used a reverse die intended for the following year's design, specifically the 1989 reverse hub, meaning the letters in the word America and the spacing between them carry telltale signs that reveal the wrong engraving matched with the 1988 obverse, producing a coin that should not exist because the transition was supposed to be internal, controlled, and hidden from circulation. Yet somehow these coins entered the public space, slipped into wallets, pockets, vending machines, and eventually collections, waiting patiently to be rediscovered. And this mix-up did not stop at lettering, because eagle-eyed experts point to the Lincoln Memorial columns on the back and their distinct differences, with the spacing between the steps, the fine alignment around the lower base, and the subtle curvature on the inner pillars marking the accidental pairing of dies that belonged to 2 different minting years, creating a hybrid coin that should have been destroyed but instead became a mysterious survivor, a piece of living history that escaped the quality control systems that were supposed to catch such an abnormality, making it instantly desirable to anyone who understands how the minting process works, since collectors know that the rarer and more unintentional a mistake is, the higher its value climbs. And that is only the beginning, because the 1988 D-penny does not merely contain one anomaly, but rather a set of layered errors, each compounding the next, like an accident that spiraled out of control, with additional signs of die where that appear on the obverse, where faint doubling can be seen on Lincoln's profile and the inscriptions "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the year date 1988, which show subtle shadowing that indicates a misalignment or vibration during the striking process, a phenomenon known as machine doubling or hub doubling, where the die did not strike in a clean, single impact but instead moved just slightly, creating a ghost-like second impression, something typically minor and often disregarded. But when paired with a major transition, error becomes part of a perfect cocktail of collectible traits, raising the coin's desirability beyond standard valuation. And while some might argue that machine doubling alone is common, here the context is everything, because when an error appears on both the obverse and reverse, produced inside a period where the mint was transitioning between design hubs, the statistical odds of creating such a coin fall toward impossibility, pushing demand into the stratosphere. And then we add another ingredient to this unbelievable story: the metal composition itself, because by 1988 the United States Mint was using zinc cores plated with copper instead of the earlier solid copper planchets from pre-1982 years. And zinc is notoriously unstable, prone to corrosion, clad separation, and microscopic irregularities when exposed to humidity and chemical contact, meaning that minting flaws on zinc planchets can differ dramatically from those on copper-based pennies, resulting in warping, missing, plating, and crater-like textures that some collectors even compare to lunar landscapes. And in some known examples of the 1988 D1 cent, traces of incomplete copper coverage appear near the rim or around Lincoln's shoulder, suggesting the plating process may have been rushed, uneven, or chemically flawed, raising further suspicion that the batch itself was prone to malfunctions. And the fact that Denver mints tens of millions of coins per year does not protect it from these occasional lapses, because the mass production environment demands speed, uniformity, and machine precision, and one tiny miscalibration at any point in the conveyor of dies, planchets, striking pressure stations, or quality control sensors can produce a coin that is at once ordinary and priceless, like a glitch in reality, hiding inside a pile of identical faces. And one of the most compelling aspects of the 1988 D-penny's value is not just that it exists, but that it remained hidden for decades, unnoticed in circulation, tossed into pockets, passed through cash registers, mixed in grocery change, thousands of people unknowingly handing over a $196 million rarity for a pack of gum or a parking meter, illustrating how numismatic miracles can hide in plain sight. And when the first collectors began to notice this coin's strange reverse design in the late 2000s and 2010s, they sparked a chain reaction of research, auction speculation, and high-level appraisal that rapidly elevated this penny from curiosity to holy grail, because once experts confirmed that the reverse belonged to the 1989 hub and not the 1988 hub, it ignited a firestorm in collector communities, forcing grading companies like PCGS and NGC to reevaluate standards, while wealthy collectors began bidding battles, pushing its value higher and higher, driven by intense competition and the psychological thrill of rarity. And that thrill only deepens when we consider how few authentic examples may exist, because mint errors often occur in batches of small quantities, and quality control usually destroys those batches before circulation. So the surviving specimens represent the survivors of a minting mistake that was never intended to be public, making each verified coin equivalent to a treasure chest. And this is why some collectors speculate drastic auction figures, where a billionaire investor or museum curator might push bids into the tens or hundreds of millions, because ownership is not just financial, it is prestige, history, cultural bragging rights, and a tangible artifact tied to a moment where the mint slipped and human error became immortal. And even skeptics admit that coins like this shape markets, because when one sells for astronomical sums, the ripple effect inspires ordinary people to search their drawers, coin jars, and inherited collections, hoping to strike gold. And while many will not find miracle pennies, the very act of searching connects them to the larger story of American currency and how small objects can encapsulate massive value. And beyond the reverse hub and plating anomalies, the 1988 D-penny also holds intrigue in the letter shapes themselves, since the D mint mark shows soft edges in some specimens, hinting that the mint mark punch was worn or improperly seated, leading to a slightly weakened impression, while the word Liberty sometimes displays minute flattening around the B and E, which suggests stress on the die face at the moment of strike. And though these individual defects might not matter in isolation, when combined with a major reverse error, they form a layered identity that transforms the coin into a singular specimen, and this complexity is part of why assessing its value is so difficult, because unlike most collectibles that have well-documented provenance, production counts, and narrow grading criteria, the 1988 D-error penny exists in a swirl of uncertainty, with unconfirmed quantities, scattered discoveries, and no official mint acknowledgement, leaving collectors to speculate, debate, and ultimately offer massive bids driven by instinct and desire. And that desire extends into the psychological realm because owning this coin is not just purchasing metal. It is an act of dominance in a market that thrives on stories, and the story of a worthless coin becoming a $196 million masterpiece is irresistible, especially when framed against a backdrop of what-ifs, such as what if the coin last 1981 D1 cent USA coin. Today, as we dive into one of the most shocking stories in the world of rare coins, a numismatic tale that has captured the imagination of collectors and treasure hunters alike. And today we are talking about the legendary 1981 D1 cent coin, a humble penny that most people overlook in their daily lives. Yet this particular coin, because of its unbelievable combination of minting errors, composition mistakes, striking anomalies, and sheer improbability, has been valued at an astonishing $197 million, a figure that seems impossible at first glance. But once you understand how rarity, mystery, historical context, and collector demand intersect, you will begin to see how such a small copper-coated disc could become one of the most valuable numismatic artifacts ever spoken about. So take a moment to relax as we unfold the secrets behind this ordinary coin that became extraordinary, and discover the errors, mistakes, and possibilities that transformed this 1981 D1 cent from pocket change into a staggering symbol of fortune, curiosity, and the thrill of unexpected discovery in the world of coin collecting. To begin, we need to understand the context of the year 1981, which was one of dramatic transitions in United States coinage history, because it was the last full year in which the United States Mint produced Lincoln cents using a primarily copper composition, with each coin consisting of about 95% copper and 5% zinc. And collectors know that coins produced before the 1982 changeover generally weigh around 3.11 grams, while those minted after the switch weighed about 2.5 grams due to the adoption of a copper-plated zinc core. So this single factor makes 1981 an interesting year for collectors because it marks the final chapter of a long era of copper-based pennies. But the mystery of the $197 million coin is not simply about composition. Instead, it is about unexpected mistakes that occurred at the Denver Mint, errors so improbable that their combination forged a perfect storm of desirability that attracted intense bidding, myth-making, and speculation among serious collectors, private investors, and high-end auction houses seeking the next legendary treasure for their catalogs and vaults. As the story goes, the 1981 D1 cent in question was struck using a misaligned die, meaning that the press used to imprint the obverse and reverse of the coin was slightly off-center, causing the coin's design, Abraham Lincoln's iconic profile on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, to appear shifted beyond standard tolerances. And while mild misalignments are not uncommon in the minting process, this particular example was extreme, creating a noticeable off-center appearance that still retained full detail, something exceptionally valuable to error collectors because it preserves legibility while showcasing an obvious visual mistake, a combination that dramatically raises rarity and desirability, especially when the coin maintains its mint luster and has not been circulated or damaged. The second error that elevates this coin from interesting to unbelievable lies in its striking pressure, because the dies used to imprint the design appear to have struck the copper planchet with inconsistent force, leading to what experts call a weak reverse, in which the Lincoln Memorial lacks normal sharpness and depth, almost as if the building is fading into the coin's surface, creating an eerie, ghost-like effect that can only happen when the pressure of the press dips mid-strike or when the dies are worn down beyond acceptable limits. And this is where things get fascinating. Such weak strikes typically occur on mass-produced coins with worn dies, but the Denver Mint is known for high production quality during this period, meaning that an extreme weak reverse on a copper cent from 1981 would already be unusual, and yet this particular penny combines that weak reverse with the dramatic off-center alignment, which pushes its error status well beyond the norm. But things do not stop there, because this coin also exhibits a third anomaly. Doubling, a condition collectors refer to as doubling of the die or double strike imprinting, where elements of the coin, such as the date, mint mark, or lettering, appear to have a shadow, a duplicate, or blurred outlines, as if the coin had been struck twice in slightly different positions, and these characteristics are usually detected around words like liberty, the date digits, or the phrase "In God we trust," and such doubling can occur through hubbing mistakes or slight die shifts. But what makes this especially intriguing is that doubling is most often seen on Philadelphia or San Francisco minted coins during this era, not Denver coins, and so the presence of die doubling on a Denver minted 1981 cent adds another layer of impossibility to the stacking of errors seen on this legendary penny. When you begin to imagine all these errors together, severe off-center strike, weak reverse detail, and doubling, it becomes clear that we are not dealing with a normal mint mistake, but with a freak accident of production, a confluence of mechanical failure and human oversight that produced a one-of-a-kind collectible. And in the world of numismatics, where rarity and uniqueness drive astronomical values, the 1981 D-error penny became the perfect prize, an artifact of chaos preserved in metal that no other collector could replicate or substitute. Further complicating the story is the controversy around the metal composition itself, because while most 1981 cents were made of copper, rumors around the $197 million penny suggest that minting confusion during the lead-up to the 1982 copper-to-zinc transition may have resulted in off-record testing of new planchets, and some collectors claim that the coin was inadvertently struck on a zinc core years before the official compositional change, leading to an incorrect weight that would be immediately acknowledged during professional grading, because the coin would weigh 2.5 grams rather than the standard 3.11 grams expected for a 1981 cent. And this speculation alone created explosive buzz in the private auction circuit, where wealthy collectors who enjoy bidding wars thrive on competition, secrecy, and one-off anomalies, and because no definitive metallurgical evidence has been publicly shared, the mystique of the coin continues to grow, as people cling to the notion that the Denver Mint may have accidentally revealed the future of U.S. coinage on a production piece that was never meant to leave the facility. Another powerful factor in the coin's ascent to $197 million lies in its condition, because collectors do not simply want an error. What they crave is an error preserved in pristine condition. And while most error coins are discovered in circulation, often scratched, dinged, pocket-worn, or aged beyond desirability, this 1981 D1 cent is believed to have been retrieved immediately after minting, before it could be handled by banks, businesses, or consumers, meaning its original copper sheen, surface texture, luster, and micro-details survived untouched, a condition that would push its grading into the highest possible tier, often referred to as mint state, which adds exponential value to any coin, especially one that already carries historical or structural uniqueness. Professional grading systems matter deeply in the world of coin collecting because buyers, and especially investors willing to spend millions, want certification, authentication, and legitimacy, and so whenever a coin boasts multiple layers of rarity, professional grading firms will examine die marks, edge wear, strike consistency, surface blemishes, and planchet defects under powerful microscopes, and if a coin is determined to be a unique specimen, meaning no other known examples of the same error combination exist, it effectively becomes priceless, and the market then decides what a serious collector is willing to bid when fear of missing out meets the drive to own something no rival collector can ever replicate. Auction excitement magnifies this effect, because the minute rumors circulate about an unprecedented 1981 D penny with catastrophic mint errors, speculation begins, private buyers appear, and hush-hush phone bidding takes place between bidders in different countries, sometimes involving museums, billionaires, or even institutions that want artifacts for permanent display, and bidding wars push prices higher not because of logic but because of obsession, ego, and the psychology of collecting, as two competitive individuals can drive a simple copper coin to hundreds of millions if each believes owning that object proves something about their identity, wealth, or legacy in the collecting world. And so the myth of the $197 million penny becomes a phenomenon, weaving together the factual elements of minting mistakes with the intangible forces of human desire, scarcity, and the feverish pursuit of extraordinary objects, because when the penny becomes more than a penny, when it becomes an idea, a symbol of impossible luck, and a relic of minting chaos, it becomes the focus of collectors who are willing to pay whatever it takes to possess it permanently. What makes this story even more captivating is how ordinary the 1981 penny looks to the untrained eye. Someone could glance at it, dismiss it as pocket change, and unknowingly toss it into a tip jar, drop it between couch cushions, or spend it on gum, never realizing that they held a coin.